Hello and welcome to World Civilizations 2. We are studying the 1500s till the present day, and we are on chapter 31 today, and we are studying the early Industrial Revolution. Um, so we are on chapter 31, it's on page 419, and I'm going to do the PowerPoint and video today. The first thing I want to talk about is this chart. See if you can see it. And it says a false social construct. And a false social construct is just a false thing in society. Society says everyone needs to wear green if you're cool and blue if you're not cool. And that's actually a false social construct because it has no factual basis, and society just decided one day to have it that way. So here we have what happened in the Industrial Revolution. There was a false social construct where there were spheres. There was a sphere, a private sphere, where women were only allowed to be in that sphere. Now, this is only middle class women, lower middle class women, and wealthy women. The lower classes and working class women actually had much more freedom than the other women. These women, the lower class, middle class, and wealthy women, society truly wanted to control. Okay, and they had more agency, and they had more movement, and they had more control before the Industrial Revolution that we see. So private sphere consisted of women. Men could move in and out, but only women were supposed to stay here in the church. They could go to church and have some activity in the church, home, family, kids, God. They were to be dependents. They were to ask no questions. They were only to read the Bible, and that's the only reason they were to be educated, and they were not supposed to think. So those are just some false social constructs that really there's no basis for that. And they were really kind of told that they were in charge of emotional things, not logical. Leave that to the men. And so over here, men were in the public sphere. In the public sphere, that was politics, education, money, rights, careers, and thinking. Men only. And they could move back and forth. And again, this is not a true statement. This is simply only what was needed in order to get the Industrial Revolution going, because you needed men working in urban areas, and you needed women taking care of the children at home. And we'll talk about that. A lot of these changes were happening in the Industrial Revolution. All right, so let's go ahead, and I'll put myself in the corner. And we'll go ahead and get started. The early Industrial Revolution. Okay. Okay, here we have a picture. Actually, where I am is kind of a bad spot. Maybe I'll move myself over here. This is a loom. It says, this is a loom. You can see how noisy it is in a factory, and dangerous. It was very dangerous. They really didn't care about the workers. They needed them to make money, and it was kind of a greedy, it wasn't kind of, it was a greedy capitalistic system at the beginning, sacrificing men and women, and really exploiting women and children for a buck. These factory owners were, and we saw that capitalism seriously needed some serious guidelines and laws to control it, because human nature was just festering into greed. Not everyone, but quite a large lot that were owning factories. Okay, so it was dangerous and noisy in this mill. The many exposed machinery parts were constantly jamming, often at the expense of a worker's daily wage. And there was just a lot of accidents, losing limbs. You can just read about early factory days. I don't know if you've ever worked in a factory. I worked in a factory in college, and it may have been absolutely one of the best things that I ever did, because I learned so much, and it was the hardest work I've ever done in my life. And I was only a temporary worker, but it was really, really, really hard work and not treated well at all. Okay. So we have a chronology, increased trade, population, agriculture production. And that's really important because you need agriculture production in order to shift people to the city so they can live there. Change in premarital relationships and family structure, huge change. We had 3 of those huge dynamics were in your book. People were getting married earlier. It used to be 27, then it went down to 22 for women and 23.5 for men. And there was a lot of children born out of wedlock. And so it was like a social switch or push they wanted to control. And that's kind of why we have this going on, because society wanted to control people's actions. Industrialization of the northwestern Europe, it started there. Now, I need to stop and tell you something. China was ready for an industrial revolution. They had smelting where they added oxygen to iron, heating up iron, 800 to 1,000 years before Europeans had it. So something you need to understand is China was actually ready on the cusp of an industrial revolution, but their population was growing so quickly that they had to feed people before they could have this boom. All right, because they were having technology. They were having great success in technology with agriculture and production and increased trade. And you have to understand the reason it was called the Dark Ages in Europe is because it was stagnant. Nothing was happening from 500 to 1500 CE, Common Era, or AD. And the rest of the world was taking off during this time. This Dark Ages in Europe wasn't dark for, the Islamic cultures were booming, and there was medicine and algebra, and they were rewriting Greek manuscripts and saving them, while Europeans were destroying knowledge. And the Chinese also had great inventions and were booming as a society. So we don't often think of that because of Eurocentrism, which is one of your words, and because of ethnocentrism. We don't look outside ourselves. When I was in college, I didn't take world civilizations. I took Western civilization, which is only Europe and the Greeks and the Romans. Okay. First railroad, second industrial revolution, petroleum, and electricity. Okay. All right. And this all came as an outgrowth of the scientific revolution, which is super interesting. All right, we have all these things that happened, the prerequisites. Upsurge in the world trade, rising population, increase in money flow, experienced managers. Anytime you pump education into your country, it's going to really have a wonderful effect. And you'll see the Industrial Revolution, the second wave of the Industrial Revolution, it says that Germany took over. And the reason is because of Martin Luther and the 95 Thesis. He said everyone should read. And actually Germany was, or Prussia at the time, it wasn't Germany yet, Prussia and Austria were teaching their people to read and having education, while England was putting kids in factories. And that's one of your quiz questions is, how old were kids when they were starting in factories? They were 5 or 6. How long were they working? From 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning to 8 or 9 at night, which is absolute greedy capitalism. Okay. And then they also took great advantage of women and children by paying them so far below what they paid men for the same work. And instead of educating children, they were using them to make a profit. Capitalism, we're going to see in history, really the greedy capitalism can just spin out of control and hang on to slavery. And that's why slavery took so long to be abolished. And just these different things where greedy capitalism can just really oppress people. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, agrarian improvements. Highly yield new world crops. The potato actually came from South America, which is very interesting after the exploration of Spanish explorers. So there were all these agrarian and farming improvements, and then you could feed your urban centers, and they didn't all have to be farmers. And that was really revolutionary because you need a large city in order to have your industrial revolution. Okay. And let's go. The method of machine industry. Industrial production can lessen unit costs of production through improved technology. You have all kinds of technology, and it grew from the scientific revolution. It's really important to talk about that. What's really interesting is like textiles. You could buy 5 men's shirts or 5 underwear. Underwear was huge. That people were switching from homemade to the factory bought, and
It's 11 o'clock.
And so people were switching, and you could buy 5 shirts, undershirts, or 5 underwear, women's or men's, for every one that was made, by hand. So it really was cheaper and sophisticated as these new products came. Okay, putting out system, and that's what we were talking about before. They were making entrepreneurs distributed raw materials to workers and families. They only had a few people working for them. They had a lot more risk to make a profit. You paid workers a piecework wage, and it was just kind of to supplement to rural families. So the factory system was completely different, brought workers to one location under strict supervision. They bore the risk of the profits. He paid workers a fixed scale. Although they paid women and children considerably less for the same work. England, the initial leader in the industrialism, population growth, energy pioneer, key raw materials. One of your quiz questions: coal and cotton. Transportation network. You have to understand transportation. Yes, they had. Railroads were coming and that sort of thing. But there was a canal system, and actually there was a canal system in Ohio, which is just amazing. And I want to make sure that you can read the bottom of this. But these canals you could ride for very cheap, and a horse would pull it, or they would have some sort of a stick to push it as well, but usually horses or mules pulled canal boats, and you can actually still ride them in Upper Ohio. But they actually had these canal systems as well in England. It's fascinating. The canal was not very wide, 40 to 60 feet wide, and small canal boats could pass up and down, and you could get to work. It's kind of very interesting, actually. All right. One thing we're talking about different leaders and people making all kind of technology discoveries and inventions and that sort of thing, which really powered the Industrial Revolution. We already talked about that. One huge thing was Eli Whitney and the cotton gin. I know there's several listed here, but Eli Whitney and the cotton gin was listed in your textbook as well. And a lot of historians really believe that slavery would have ended much sooner had the cotton gin not been invented, because then U.S. was king of cotton, and they sold all over the world the most. And because the cotton gin made it easier to separate the seeds from the cotton, it made slavery just more appealing. Again, we have greedy capitalism entering in. When England and other countries were beginning to free the slaves and actually paying their government, paying slave owners for their slaves to ease the economic issues, which Abraham Lincoln actually did try to do, but the South wouldn't hear of it. You have several inventions listed: the flying shuttle, spinning jenny, spinning mule, water frame, the power loom, steam engine, engineering feats, railroad, bridges, ships, and then we talk about Isambard Brunel, who was both an engineer and he owned some of the railroads in England. We have a lovely map. Let me move video down. Oh, I can't really move anywhere. And it shows the industrial leadership in industrialism And I believe that's the one that has the urban centers. Okay. Right, into textiles and that sort